Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this evening. And just a couple housekeeping rules before we get started. We do have your lines muted, but at the end of the presentation we'll unmute your lines and you can ask your questions. And there is also a chat feature where you can type in any questions as we go along. And I'm Ann Arceo, I'm a financial planner and I'm the founder of Savvy Duo Financial Planning. And I specialize in helping newlyweds and couples to take control of their finances and reach their money goals. And I'm based in Los Angeles, California, but I work with couples nationwide.
Hi everyone, my name is Armene Bazikian. I'm a local estate planning attorney here in Los Angeles, and I specialize in wills and trusts, and I help families coordinate their estate plans for the future to make sure that their loved ones are taken care of should the unexpected happen. I'm a mother to a 1.5-year-old little girl, and my husband and I are expecting our baby number 2. So with that in mind, I'm thanking all of you for showing up tonight because I know how difficult it is to coordinate with your schedule as a parent. We will have the chat feature on, so if you have any questions, just type it in and we will make sure to get to it at the end. With that said, we will also be recording this seminar and actually emailing it out to each of you so you can pass it along to friends and family that you think may be interested. So with that said, let's get started.
Okay, great. And tonight we're going to be talking about the top financial moves for new parents. So budgeting, insurance planning, college savings, and then Armene is going to be talking about crucial legal steps that parents need to take to make sure their family is protected. And with that said, Armene is going to take it away, and our first question for Armene is, what are some things new parents need to do from a legal perspective?
So from a legal perspective, I'm just going to pull up some slides that we have. From a legal perspective, I think the most important thing that parents should think about and should take care of is making sure that they have a guardianship in place for their children. When it comes to their children, parents worry about everything, and I did this. What are you going to feed them, keeping them safe and healthy, and providing them with the tools they need to learn and develop. But what most parents forget, or rather prioritize lower on their to-do list, is actually naming a guardian for their minor children. And as a new parent, in my opinion, this is the most important legal step that you can take. And before we dive into the legal waters, I want to clarify the role of a guardian so that everyone knows. A guardian is somebody who will take care of your child and make decisions regarding his education, personal care, and well-being. If both parents of the minor are no longer living or incapacitated and can't care for them, that's when the guardian steps up and does their job. And the guardian will do the job until the child reaches age of majority, which in California is 18. Now, legally, if you don't select a guardian, what will happen is the California legal system will decide for you who the guardian of your children will be. So some random judge, who you've never met is going to be deciding who's going to take care of your child. And personally, as a mother myself, I would hate for my child, to be for their care to be in the hands of some stranger who's never met them, doesn't know my parenting style, doesn't know my child's personality. So, and in addition to that, the court process is expensive and time-consuming, so you want to stay away from it as much as you can or make the process as easy as possible. And, putting a guardianship in place is rather a simple process, and the process appears scary and stressful, especially for new parents, but it really isn't. It's relatively a simple legal document that you can, for example, I would be able to draft as an estate planning attorney, and it's unique to your family's needs and unique to your child. So oftentimes people will think that because they don't have a large estate or a lot of money and their estate is rather small, that they don't need an estate plan. But for those of you that have minor children, that's probably the one and important reason to have an estate plan, regardless of the actual size of your estate. So,
and picking a guardian is a very important decision, but it also seems like it could be a difficult decision. How do you select a guardian that's right for your family?
Well, because the guardian you choose will basically be taking care of everything for your child and making decisions about every aspect of their life, who they're going to date, what age they're going to date, for example, what are they going to eat, et cetera, it is an important enough decision where parents kind of get stressed out by it, but to simplify the matter, I always advise my clients to think in terms of the next 5 years of their life. So what happens is that most parents get overwhelmed by the process, and in thinking of who to select, they automatically shut out the parents, their parents, the grandparents of the child, because their mind automatically assumes that, well, when I'm dead, my parents are probably going to be dead. But that's kind of thinking in really, really long term. So what I always advise my clients to do is always think in terms of the next 5 years, what's best for your child in the next 5 years, and then kind of reevaluate from there. And just remember, pick someone who's, around today and the best fit for your child today, and then you're going to, reevaluate the situation anyway and reevaluate depending on your family changes. And the second piece of advice I always give is always name alternate guardians. So you pick one person, always name a second, third, fourth, however many you want, name them, because should something happen and that person not be around or not want to take on the role for whatever reason, you definitely want to make sure you have, an alternate lined up. That's probably the most important part of it.
And, of course, I'm thinking from a financial standpoint. Is the guardian also in charge of the money or assets that parents leave behind for their children?
That's a great question, Ann. The simple answer is no. The guardian is only in charge of the child's actual well-being and education. So feeding the child, dressing the child, getting him to school, picking the preschool, et cetera, parent-teacher conferences. The person that you name to be in charge of your estate will be the person that handles the finances for the child. So you can have one person who's financially savvy selected to handle the finances for your child, and you can have a motherly figure that's always in your child's life selected as a guardian, for example, to care for their everyday needs. So with that said, it could possibly end up being the same person, but you don't have to have the same person. It just simplifies things if it is the same person. So with that said, I kind of want to jump onto the second area that I think is most important for new parents, and that's making sure you have a healthcare directive in place. And this is especially true for women that are expecting. So all you pregnant women out there, this is probably aside from doing the guardianship when your child is actually born, up until that point, this is the most important thing you can do. And so a healthcare directive, or an advanced healthcare directive, which is sometimes what it's called, is a legal document, and it does a few things. It gives your doctor permission to release information about your health. So without this authorization, your doctor's not going to be able to release information because they're going to be prevented by certain laws like HIPAA. And without the information, your family's not going to be able to make an informed decision. So that's one vital thing that it does. The second is that it actually describes what you want done if you're incapacitated. Like, it answers questions like, do you want to remain on life support or life-sustaining treatment, things of that nature. And the third thing it does is it actually allows you to name an agent or a power of attorney to make decisions for you related to your body, basically all medical decisions for you. So those are the three most important things that the document does, in addition to some other things. But this is probably the most important for pregnant women because, and I'm speaking from experience, we tend to create these elaborate birth plans, but, and we detail, how we're going to deliver, what medication we want, what we want done with the baby right after, et cetera, and then we totally forget to take care of making sure all of our ducks are lined up for ourselves physically. So it's important that you have this directive in place because delivering a child, no matter the method you choose, is a pretty dramatic physical event for a woman's body to undergo, and you want to make sure that you have everything lined up before you start packing your hospital bag. And I can't stress the importance of this document. And I'm sure you guys have all heard of the Texas woman on the news. It's a sad situation, but it pretty much what it does is it reminds us, how important life is and how we should never. It basically reminds us that you never know what to expect. You have to make sure you have everything in place should that unexpected event happen. And even, from a personal example that I want to share with you guys, I had a difficult delivery with my daughter, and some medical decisions had to be made right after I delivered her, and I was, in and out of consciousness, so I couldn't give the okay and make the decisions. But I'm glad that I had this document in my file, that my doctor had it. He knew who to go to and who would make the decision for me, and he had details of what I wanted in the document. So it kind of made everything smooth, easy, and a faster process than it could have been. So.
And is a healthcare directive and guardianship a part of an estate plan?
Yeah, definitely. So if you do have a comprehensive estate plan, a great estate plan, it should cover all the different scenarios that could possibly come up in your life, whether it's death, what happens when you're incapacitated, who takes care of your finances if you can. So, it not only includes this guardianship selection, but an advanced healthcare directive, but it should also include various other documents like powers of attorney for finances, special power of attorney, general assignments, spousal property agreements. It should take care of kind of dictating what happens with your digital assets, which is something new in estate planning. It should also have a trust certificate. These are just some of the documents, but a comprehensive estate plan should include other vital documents, the most important being a living trust, which, in my opinion, is the backbone of a great estate plan.
And why does someone need a trust and not a will?
Another great question. So in California, if you die with a will, you basically go through a court process called probate, and this is where basically a judge will look at your will and basically do what it says, but nonetheless you still have to go through this court process. And under the same laws in California, even if you don't have a will, you still have to go through the probate process. So whether you have a will or you don't, you have to go through this court process and have a judge review everything before distributions are made to your loved ones. So if you don't have a will, the judge will make the decision about, who gets what by following the laws that have been enacted by legislature. If you do have a will, the judge will just basically do what your will says about who inherits from you. So, you want to avoid the probate process because it's extremely, extremely time-consuming. I mean, it's right now with the budget cuts and court closures, it takes about 1.5 to 2 years to actually complete a probate from start to finish. So you absolutely want to avoid that process if you can. And we'll talk about how to avoid it, but it's not only time-consuming, but it's very costly. For an estate worth about $600,000, it costs about $12,000 just in attorney fees to take care of probating it, and that's a statutory fee. You can't negotiate that with the attorney. The judge is going to have you pay that fee before distributions are made, essentially. So it's a very, very costly process compared to actually going to an estate planning attorney and hiring them to do a complete estate plan. And the value of the estate, like the $600,000, they don't take into consideration liabilities that you might have against your assets. So if you have a house worth $600,000 with a mortgage of $500,000, leaving you with only $100,000 in equity, which is technically what you own or what you had at your death, they don't care. They think you had $600,000. So they base the attorney's fees on that value, which is astronomical technically if you just think about the overall picture. So it's a very expensive process. You want to avoid it altogether. Not to mention it's public information. So like your nosy neighbor will be able to tap into the probate court files and just get everything they need to know about you that they've always wanted to know, they can now have access to. So it ends up being very expensive and lengthy, and you can totally avoid it. It's super easy to avoid it, and all you have to do is have a living trust in place. And this is why I stress the fact that a living trust is basically the backbone of a great estate plan. It's the most important thing you can do as far as, or the most important part of the estate plan. It's basically a separate legal entity. So a living trust is kind of like if you think of an LLC or a corporation, and what you do is you create this separate entity during your life, and you can change anything you want about it during your life, but the trust becomes the new owner of your assets. So when you die, there's really nothing left in your personal estate to actually probate, because during your life you'd kind of given it to the trust as the new owner, and your trust is going to last as long as you've dictated in the document, as long as you've decided on with your attorney and written out. So for example, like let's say your sole asset is your home, and you create a living trust with your spouse, and your living trust becomes the new owner of the home, and you and your spouse instead will become the trustees of the trust. So the trustees as in the people that are going to control the trust. So what happens is at both of your deaths, the home will be distributed to, let's say, your children, because that's what you want, and there's going to be no need for probate. It's a done deal. There's nothing else you need to do, pretty much. And another great thing about a trust is that it doesn't just work in circumstances of death, but it also will cover things when you're incapacitated. So it really takes into account all possible scenarios in life. So if you're 70 years old and you have dementia, or you somehow can't physically take care of your finances, your trustee, whoever is next in line after you, is going to be able to go to the bank and do whatever they need to do to take care of your finances without having to first go to court and get a conservatorship over you. So it's very, very important. It has different uses. And for parents with minor children, a living trust is super important, because without it, if your assets, even if they are very, very small and you don't have a lot, without it, if your assets go through the probate court process, what the judge will end up doing if you have minor children is throwing it into a custodianship account, a UTMA account, for example, and then just having it handed over to your kids at 18. And you definitely don't want that, because that would probably be the best 18th birthday gift, to be handed a lump sum of money or a house or something. So there's some great benefits to having a living trust, and every parent should consider it regardless of the size of the estate. And so those are my tips from a legal perspective for new parents. Those are some things to consider, before the baby gets here, so that everything is kind of lined up. But I want to talk a little bit about what you should do as far as from a financial standpoint. And I guess I'm going to turn it over to Anne, and we're going to talk about what tips she has for you guys as far as finances are concerned as a new parent. So I have a question for you that I'm sure everyone's wondering. So how can parents actually prepare themselves financially, and how can they start building a budget? Where do you begin?
Okay, thanks, Armine. Thanks for sharing all of that great information. And one of the most important money moves you can make as a new parent is to create a spending plan. And a spending plan is really just a fancy way of saying to have a budget. And the first step is to review how much your current lifestyle costs. So if you were to sit down and add up all of your bills, all of your variable spending like groceries, eating out, gas, what would that number come to? And how does the money you spend each month compare to the income that you earn? Is there any money left over for savings? Do you need to adjust your budget and cut back on certain expenses? And after the webinar, I'm going to send each of you my free budget tracker, and you can use this worksheet to start this process. So it will help you to determine how much you're spending each month and how that compares to your income. And the next step, for those of you who are expecting, you need to make a plan for how your budget will change once your baby arrives. So do some research and estimate your additional costs by thinking about childcare costs, health care, the cost of adding your baby to your health insurance, diapers, clothing, all those other baby supplies. And there's some great worksheets online that can help you estimate these costs. I know thebump.com has some great resources, and you can also visit the website I listed there, thebabycenter.com/babycostcalculator. And once you understand how much you're spending each month, I want you to compare your expenses to the 50-30-20 method of budgeting. And this isn't a rule that's set in stone. It's just a starting point. It may need to be adjusted depending on your unique situation. But I look at a client's net, so this is their after-tax income, and I recommend that no more than 50% go towards fixed expenses such as your mortgage, your rent, utilities, cell phone payment, anything that you get a monthly bill for. And I recommend spending no more than 30% on lifestyle expenses such as groceries, gas, eating out, entertainment, and then 20% on savings and extra debt payments. So this would also include your retirement savings. And then I recommend that you separate and automate your money. So if you keep all of your money in one account and you're using that one account to pay bills, you swipe your debit card to pay for groceries, for going out, it becomes really difficult to know how much money you have and how much you've spent. So instead, I recommend that you separate your money using 3 different buckets that have specific purposes and use 3 different bank accounts for each bucket. So you would have a static bucket that would include all of your fixed expenses. As I mentioned before, these are the things that you get a monthly bill for. You'd have a control bucket, and it's called a control bucket because these are the expenses that you can most easily control. You can cut back on your groceries or eating out. It's a little bit harder to control your monthly mortgage payment. So that's why that's referred to as a control bucket. So all of your variable spending would come out of that bucket. And then lastly, the dynamic bucket would be your savings or your extra debt payment. And you can actually have more than one account for this. So you could have an account for an emergency fund and another account for a vacation fund. And the last step is to automate your financial life. And once you get your account set up and you know how much is going to go towards each bucket, set up automatic transfers to each account. As new parents, you're going to have a lot going on in your life. You want to simplify your finances and make it as easy as possible. So for example, let's say you earn $4,000 a month. Now you would want to set up an automatic transfer to have $2,000 sent to your static bucket for your fixed expenses. And in that account, I would also say that you should set up bill pay so that all of your bills are paid automatically and you don't have to worry about it. Next, you would transfer $1,200 to cover your lifestyle spending, and lastly, $800 would go to your savings account. And as I mentioned before, you could actually have more than one account for your savings goals. And the beauty of this system is that you will only spend money from your control bucket, which is for variable spending. And because you already put money into your fixed account, you know your bills are being taken care of. You've already transferred money to your savings account, so you know your savings goals are being taken care of. So the money left in your control bucket is money you can spend without guilt or worry. And I know this is a very quick overview of, something that can be much more complex, but I can work with you one-on-one to help you make this system work for your unique needs. And I also give clients access to an online program, First Step Cash Management, that helps them create this this bucket budget.
So is this when you should open up like a college savings? Would that be something that you would do at this point?
Okay, so I first want to point out that parents need to make sure that they have their own finances in order before they start a college savings fund for their child. So there aren't scholarships or student loans for retirement. If you get to age 65 and you no longer want to work, or you're unable to work and you don't have any savings in place, you're either going to have to try to scrape by on your Social Security, or you're going to become dependent on your child. So I recommend that you pay off high-interest debt first, save for retirement, and then focus on opening a college savings account.
So, and I get asked this question by clients all the time, is they've heard of a college savings plan, but they don't know how to open one or when they should open it.
Great question, Armene. So there are a few different ways to start saving for your child's future, and one of the most popular ways is to start a 529 college savings plan. A 529 plan is an education savings plan operated by a state, and the money is typically invested, and those investments grow tax-free. So that's the big perk of the 529 plan, is that tax-free growth on your investments. You won't get a tax break for the money that you deposit into the account, but once it's invested, you won't pay federal taxes and in some cases even state taxes on the growth of your investments. And the other great thing about a 529 plan is you can usually open an account for just $25 a month. You do need to keep in mind that the money you put in needs to be used for qualified education expenses, or you could face a 10% tax penalty. So if your child doesn't go to college, then you have other options to avoid the penalty. You could transfer the fund to another child. You may even be able to use it for yourself if you have a desire to go back to school. Another option you can use to save for your child's college education is to open a custodial account, such as a Uniform Gifts to Minor account, a UGMA account. And I just want to point out that each type of college savings account has a different impact on your taxes and can also have a different impact on your child's financial aid eligibility. So your child can still qualify for financial aid, and it is a great idea to save for the future, but it's also important to talk to a financial planner to decide which type of account will help you maximize your goals and help you to save the most money. And the UGMA account, it's a custodial trust account where the state establishes the terms of the trust. So the way it works is that you put money into the account for your child, and you'll be the one managing the account until your child turns 18. But once the child turns 18, they can use the funds however they wish. And once you put money into the account, you can't reverse the gift. And the other option is to establish a trust account, which Armine can comment on a little bit more.
Yeah, not that I dislike custodianship accounts like uniform transfer under the Uniform Transfer to Minors Act, but it is something that's kind of locked and set in stone. So once you distribute money into that account, you can't get it back. So if 5 years down the road you have this horrible family emergency and need money for medical care, for example, you won't be able to, take it back out. So it's pretty locked in. And the other thing I dislike about it is the fact that your 18-year-old gets handed like this lump sum of money. And if it grows to be a significant amount by then, even $20,000, $30,000 as an 18-year-old is a big chunk to have. So an alternate to that would be to create a trust for your child where you can invest the money into it. You can basically distribute the money to it and transfer it, and then you can choose whatever you want done with that money. So it doesn't necessarily have to be used for college, for example. You can choose for your child to get that fund, to get 1/3 of it, for example, upon graduation from a 4-year accredited college, and then the other 1/3 from, or at age 30, and then the remaining portion at 35, for example. So you can be as creative as you want in terms of when you dictate your child receiving the funds. I would recommend staying away from a UTMA account and creating a trust instead. But if you obviously, for whatever reason, cannot, then the UTMA account is probably the next best thing to, I guess, a college fund, a 529 college savings.
And I just wanted to point out, we listed the website there, the www.collegesavings.org. That's a great resource if any of you want to learn more about the different types of college savings plans. Of course, you can contact us and we can help you, but that's also a great resource to read more.
Great, and I actually want to say one more thing about the trust account. This trust that you establish for your child is independent and separate from your family trust. So it's a separate trust that you create, and it's just for the benefit of all of your children or one child, for example. So with that said, I want to ask you about using kind of life insurance as an investment tool for new parents, because I know once you have a kid, you're hearing all your friends, like all of a sudden they become really interested in buying life insurance. And this is the case for a lot of my clients, is they'll go out and the first thing they'll do is buy life insurance.
Having life insurance means that your family will be cared for if something were to happen to you. And this is especially important if you're the primary breadwinner for your family and they rely on your income. It's also important, though, to consider life insurance for a stay-at-home spouse. If your partner was no longer there to care for your children, then you would have additional daycare and other costs, and those costs could become a really heavy burden on your budget. And there are lots of different life insurance products out there. A term life insurance policy is a type of policy that gives you coverage for a certain term, so for, say, 20 years or 30 years. And term insurance is usually very affordable. It also has low fees, and it's not as complicated to understand. With whole life and universal life insurance, they provide permanent coverage, meaning the policy will last your entire life. And this type of coverage can be much more expensive than term insurance, and it usually has higher fees, but it also builds a cash value that you may be able to draw from later. So it's really important that you talk to your insurance agent and your financial planner to determine what type of insurance is right for you and how much coverage you're going to need. And you also want to talk to your estate planning attorney, because if something were to happen, you want to make sure that the life insurance money goes to the correct beneficiary and that the money is used in a way that you would want it to be used.
To add to that, you definitely want to make sure that your beneficiary designations are correct. What will happen is a lot of times parents will put their spouse as the primary beneficiary, and then they'll put as the secondary beneficiary their minor child. And so what will happen should you and your spouse, let's say, pass during a vacation, you'll both be gone, and your minor child will get this lump sum, and because they're a minor, it'll automatically go into a custodianship UTMA account, and that account will dictate that they get it at 18. So again, we go back to the same problem of if you don't do anything and you leave it to the default is them getting it at 18 when they're considered an adult. So an easy way to fix that is if you have a family trust in place, what you can do is make your family trust the beneficiary, even the primary beneficiary if it's between spouses. But most definitely, rather than naming your minor child, you should definitely name a living family trust as the beneficiary. That way it'll kind of flow into your family trust, and then your family trust will dictate what happens to that money, basically based on whatever you've decided, whether it's in increments to your child or in one lump sum at a higher age, like 35 or 30. So it gives you more control. And so I think we've pretty much, we're going to wrap it up and maybe go into questions at this point and see if you guys have any questions. I know that we previously received some questions by email ahead of time, so maybe we'll cover that if you guys don't have any questions. So, Anne, a question we got for you, actually. What I want to know is if somebody doesn't have like fixed income, let's say you're a real estate agent and you don't know if you're going to make a sale or you're going to make as many sales this month that you did last month, how do you do the whole budget bucket situation? How do you handle that?
So when I work with a client who doesn't have a stable income, they may get a huge lump sum of money one month and then they may not have income for several more months. So what I recommend that they do is deposit that income into a savings account, and then they're going to pay themselves a regular monthly paycheck or a biweekly paycheck, and they want to determine what set amount that can be every 2 weeks or every month so that they're creating consistency in their budget. And then they would follow the same plan. They'd put part of that paycheck into their fixed account, part into the account for just their variable spending, and then part into their savings.
Okay, that makes sense. I might put that because if you're self-employed, you're kind of just doing your own thing, and you don't necessarily fit the mold of, getting a set W-2 income or a set number, and then, it makes doing the budgeting a little bit more harder for your family.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why, I recommend that, if you got one huge lump, a few $1,000s one month, and you're not going to get paid for a couple more months, don't feel like you can go out and spend everything. You need to create a consistent paycheck for yourself and create as much consistency so that you can budget. And I know we had a question for Armene, and this is one I also get asked a lot by my clients. They want to know what's the difference between using an online website to create their estate planning documents versus hiring an attorney.
Awesome question. I get asked this all the time too. So when you go to an online website and you pay to download this form, you're essentially trying to fit your family dynamic into a form. You're molding your family to fit the form. When you go to an attorney, you're getting sound legal advice that includes tax advice. It includes a gamut of different things that you probably will never consider doing it alone. So, when you go to an attorney, an estate planning attorney, for example, like my clients, they get a unique customized estate plan. They get a unique trust that fits their family's mold. Rather than me trying to fit the family into this document, I customize the document to fit their personality and their finances and their family dynamics. So, for example, let's say you go to one of those online websites and you download a trust, and I don't know if it's I don't know how it works, but you download the trust, you do the trust for yourself, and let's say in that example you have a child that has a disability of some sort and gets Medi-Cal from the state. And so what you effectively do by not getting proper legal advice first is you're creating a document that may disqualify your child from getting these government benefits. And so for those of you that may not know, so if you are getting any type of government benefit, for example, your child's getting Medi-Cal, if you create a living trust where you leave them an inheritance of a large sum, let's say $100,000 at your death, once they get that $100,000, they definitely won't be eligible for Medi-Cal, because Medi-Cal has certain qualification standards that you have to follow. You can't have assets more than X amount, for example. So it'll automatically disqualify your child from receiving that government benefit. So if you're going out and you're doing it on your own, there's things of this nature, for example, like I mentioned, a special needs child or a child with disabilities, you're not taking into consideration, and you probably, no matter how much research you can do, you will not know as much as an estate planning attorney in terms of the dynamics between tax planning, estate planning, long-term care. There's just so much information out there that you need the legal advice before you actually do your estate plan. And you're just not getting that with the online resources. You're getting a simple form, and that's pretty much it. You're not getting any sound legal advice. So if you needed a special needs trust, you'll never know, because those websites aren't going to tell you that. They're just going to try to sell you their standard form. So
great. And we just want to check to see if there's any other questions out there. Of course, both Armine and I are both here for you. If you want to send us your questions later, you can send us an email. Our phone numbers are up there. You can call us. And I just want to point out, I know that we talked about a lot of complex topics tonight, and Armine and I could have easily have spent, a couple hours on each topic going into detail. And so, don't feel overwhelmed. You took a great first step by just attending this webinar and wanting to learn more. And both of us offer free consultations, so our contact number's up there. Give us a call, email us, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions and help you.
Definitely. If you guys have questions that you think of later tonight, during the 2 a.m. feeding, that's when things pop up in your mind, I guess. But if you do have questions, you can easily email it to us, and we can get on the phone with you or email you back in convenient times to do a phone conference or a chat or something that's convenient to you, because we know that you, as a parent, you're kind of very limited on time that you can spend on these issues. But it is, as Ann said, definitely a great first step to take to learn just a little bit about it before you actually dive into the waters. And I hope that we've answered some questions that have been lingering in the back of your minds that you just haven't gotten around to kind of getting answers to. And so thank you guys for joining us. Again, our contact information is up, and we will also be sending you a link to the recording so that you can reference this webinar if you need it in the future, and if you have a friend that you think might make use of it, you just forward it to them as well. We give you permission. It's not copyrighted or anything legally. You have our full permission to forward this to people that you like as well, that you think may benefit from it. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for joining us. And like Armine said, we know you're very busy. Your time's valuable, especially with the little one. So thanks for taking time out of your evening to join us, and we hope to hear from you in the future. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.